Equity Mate.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast that follows our journey of investing. Whether you're an absolute beginner or approaching Warren Buffett status, our aim is to break down your barriers from beginning to dividend. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. I'm very excited for this interview. We've spoken to some big names in our time, but for me and for my family, probably no bigger name than this. Big Swans supporting family, the Renahans. Dad's midlife crisis was to find AFL and to find the Swans, and so this is a real big moment for me.
That's it. It is our absolute pleasure to welcome Andrew Pridham to Equity Mates. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks, guys.
So Andrew is the co-founder of Moelis Company, where he currently serves as the vice chairman and was previously the chief executive officer. The reason Alec is excited is because he is also the chairman of the AFL club Sydney Swans and has just released his book, What Matters: Secrets of Great Leaders, Business Builders and Professional Investors. So we're going to be unpacking all of that over the next 40 minutes or so, and we can't wait. So let's crack in.
Yeah, and Andrew, I promise it's not all going to be Swans chat because you've had a pretty incredible career before the Swans, and we really want to unpack that to start with. But at the very start, we want to go all the way back to the beginning. We like to start these interviews by hearing the story of someone's first investment. We generally find there's a good lesson or a good story that comes out of it. So to kick us off today, can you tell us the story of your very first investment?
Very first, well, that's a long time ago. I don't know what it would have been, my first investment.
Maybe the first one you remember then.
The first, well, I can't remember it. Look, I think my first investment of substance probably was my first house, which I remember buying for, I think, $225,000. It was a freestanding house with a garage in Cremorne, and I regret ever selling it.
Yeah.
And that was a real stretch. I was very nervous when I bought that. It was back during the recession in 1991, I think it was, and. I've had a love affair with houses and residential ever since because I think they're great investments.
No doubt. I remember my dad, he has always said if you manage to get a property, especially in the cities, never sell, because we had some down in Richmond and sold them and what could have been. But yeah. A defining point in your career, Andrew, was leaving UBS to co-found the Australian arm of Moelis. Take us back to that time. What was it like striking out on your own? How did industry receive you, and how did that how did you go about building the arm of Moelis here in Australia?
Yeah, look, I had done it before because I left UBS in 2001, I think it was 2002, and I intended to retire. I thought that I'd had enough, and I joined the Sydney Swans board so we can get onto footy now.
Yeah.
and I thought this is going to be great. I'll just retire and do some footy stuff. I love footy. And then the clients would call me and say, can you look at this or that? So I just started helping clients, and very quickly was very busy, and that became a boutique investment bank, which was called First Provident, which I then hired some people. The two key employees were Chris Wyke and Julian Biggins, who are now the co-CEOs of MA Financial Group, which was Moelis Australia. And JP Morgan acquired that business after a couple of years of running that, and I went and ran JP Morgan, and so having gone from UBS, boutique, JP Morgan, and then after the financial crisis was a really difficult time for everybody, and JP Morgan, if you remember, back in the middle of the GFC, was one of the very few global banks that really thrived, and it was very, very strong. Jamie Dimon led it magnificently, and we were in the middle of everything that was going on. It was crazy. Every day we'd come into work. So by the end of that, I was pretty exhausted, and I actually intended to retire. That was my plan, and Julian Biggins and Chris Wyke, very entrepreneurial guys, much more than me. They wouldn't be wearing a tie like I am. Open shirt. They were really keen to build a business, and they convinced me ultimately to join them. So we got together, and our business plan was really simple, and that was get some good people together, get some capital, and do stuff.
Nice.
Easy.
That was our business plan. We didn't even write it down, and so we started very small. I think in 2009 we had 5 people, and now we've got over 400 people. Market cap's 1.5 billion, 1.4 billion, and one of the things I'm really proud of is that since starting the business back then, we didn't know where it was going to lead. It was an investment banking business. We've delivered shareholders 35% per annum compound return for 12 years, which is, so if you invested $100,000 when we started, it's now worth 10 million.
Wow.
So we're pretty proud of that. But it's snakes and ladders building a business, just like investment. And you go slowly up the ladder and quickly down the snakes, and over a year that happens, or over many years that happens, as long as you're getting better every year. That's the exciting bit.
So you've had a few cracks at retirement, and none of them have stuck. So I'm excited to see the next step and the step after that. But I guess you've just mentioned some of the investment banks you've worked for, some of the biggest in the world: JP Morgan, UBS, Moelis. What have you learned from that experience? And we'll unpack a lot of it when we talk about the book. But just high level, what are some of the big learnings?
Look, I think global investment banks, they serve a pretty important role in terms of capital formation and in the world. I think one of the things I'd say is that the big global banks are all very similar. They're different, but they're similar. A Swiss culture, I guess, of a UBS and a JP Morgan, which is a very American culture. They're different, but they're the same. And they've got many great aspects to them. They're great organisations, and they do a lot of good things, a lot of good people. I think the difficult parts about it, and ultimately what drove me not to want to work in those environments, was more self-determination, if you like, because you're very much at the whim of people whether it's in New York or London or Hong Kong, and you get caught up in all that bureaucracy. And Ken Moelis, who's our business partner, who founded Moelis Company, he used to run UBS, and he's an inspirational guy. And his joke about partnering with us is Australians are unownable, and by that he means that we Australians, I think, just by character, we're free spirits. We don't like to be told, particularly by Americans or English or anybody, what to do. We like to do things the way we want to do them, and I think by and large Australians do things really, really well. And so that's the big difference in what we are now as an Australian-owned business versus a division of a conglomerate global financial services beast.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So, you started at UBS. You just mentioned Ken Moelis was ex-UBS. The Barrenjoey guys, I'm pretty sure they're ex-UBS as well.
Yeah.
Is there something in the water at UBS?
Breeding ground.
I don't know. Look, in Australia, I joined UBS. It was really my first proper job, if you like, in banking. Back in 1998, and it was a tiny. It started its evolution into becoming a market leader. Was pretty interesting, and it's had a lot of great people go through it. I mean, the Barrenjoey guys, and you've got Chris Mackay, who's one of the Magellan founders. Yeah. There's a pretty good alumni.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Come out of it.
Yeah.
So I think that happens in all organisations. Footy clubs, it happens. You get just some success comes through, and it tends to success breeds success. And if you're around good people, people tend to get better, and they become more successful. So I think that there's a bit of a network. I mean, sure we all hate each other, but no, we don't. We actually don't. We just pretend we do. But yeah, there's a lot of guys around from UBS.
So Andrew, we're all sort of outside observers as to what happens in these big institutional banks. What is something that you think retail investors often get wrong about the institutional side of the markets?
Well, I think the institutional side of the markets, and I guess I don't know what the retail investor would even want to know about the institutional side, because they probably don't need to know too much other than they're big and they do lots of stuff. I think there's certainly I think all investors, whether it's retail or even institutional investors, and I deal with a lot of institutional investors, I think there's a general simplification and misunderstanding of how things work in the financial markets generally, and when I'm talking about investment banking, so how a mergers and acquisitions transaction, a takeover, how that actually happens. What leads company A to buy company B, what's the process for it to happen? Why does a company raise money, equity on the stock market? Why does it do a bond issue? How does it do it? How long does it take? What's involved? I think if you're not involved in it, in the really mechanical aspects of it, firstly, it's probably pretty boring to even care how it happens, because who cares? It just happens. But it's also very complex, and there's a lot of things that go into it, and it's not just the technical aspects of the legal side and the accounting and tax and all those sorts of things, but it's also the human aspect of it, the what we call the social issues, for example, which I talk about in give the book a plug. The social issues, it only impacts about 100% of public takeover deals, for example, and the social issues are who's going to be the CEO, who's going to be the chairman, who's going to stay on the board, who's going to be the CFO. When you merge two companies where you end up with two of everything. And what I think investors generally don't understand is how that process occurs, and things aren't always as natural. I think there's a tendency for investors to have a simplified view of life that, oh yeah, it made sense, that company will buy that company and this will happen, and it's never that simple. And things that might appear to have been logical to have occurred may have taken years to have happened, and only happened by the finest of margins, because finally one of the CEOs said, all right, I'll pay me enough money and I'll leave, sort of thing. And that's I think until you've been in it and understand that human emotion drives the deal making in the markets as much as the numbers do, really.
Yeah. So Andrew, in your time across investment banking, have you developed a personal investing philosophy?
Absolutely. And it's been a very expensive process, fine-tuning my investment prowess, I can tell you. Look, I think the lessons of that I've learnt in investing are many, and I guess what suits me, but doesn't suit everybody. I think generally my advice to people, whether it's friends or family, or often footballers want advice on money. God knows why they come to me, but they do. They also ask me how to do a talk from 60 out buddies often. Do you think I'm holding the ball right now? Anyway, I digress.
And Andrew's apparently taking the biggest specky at the Swans.
Ever.
Yeah.
I've got I'll get my phone and show you later. You can put it on your website. It's unbelievable. I think for most people, the important thing is really diversification, so that they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. And I think buying a house, for example, is really important. And I genuinely believe that's the cornerstone for most people, to invest in a house and then leverage it appropriately, and then use that leverage to go and do other things. Superannuation, all those sorts of things is important. I think finding the right people, it's more important for most people to find the right people to manage their money for them, rather than try and do it themselves. And the biggest mistake I think most people make, and I've made, I don't make it too much anymore, or at all anymore, is the old, you get a tip, someone says, look, this is great, it's like horse racing or something, this company can't lose, go and go and buy Bitcoin, or go and do this kind of. If you don't understand it, and don't do it, because the snakes and ladders analogy is a really good one, because you'll make some wins, and then you get seduced into doing more and more, and you'll put more bigger and bigger bets, and then bang, you'll lose it all. And I've done that repeatedly, and I've seen people do it repeatedly. And I think that the key is finding the right people to help you manage the money. Give it to them, and if they're doing a good job, just leave it there. Don't panic. Don't say, I think the market's going to collapse tomorrow. Read an article in the newspaper. I'm going to do this. Just get the right people and leave it there, and assess it every few years, and if they're not doing a great job, maybe you move it. Don't give it all to one person, spread it around, all those sort of things. Personally, I'm a very different investor, which is, I tend to have a relatively small number of things I invest in. Real estate's one of them, but also stocks, where I will take large positions and just sit on them. And I talk about in the book a study that was published in the Washington Post many years ago, and I thought it was the best ever investment paper I've read, and I tried to recreate it, so mine's slightly better. I did pinch it from somebody, but no, it's been updated. And it was all about the great companies, in the last 20 years, and I'm talking about the Apples, the Microsofts of the world, and these trillion-dollar companies have repeatedly and regularly halved, and then halved again, and then doubled. So on their journey from very big, 10-cent shares, 5-cent shares, Apple, whether it's it's a good example, through to where it is today, a $1 trillion company. It's been a roller coaster, and if as an investor, if you're reactive and every time you read bad news or the market falls, or you sell, you're just going to miss. You're not going to time it. You're not going to time it.
Yeah.
Just stick.
What's your portfolio positioning in Bitcoin?
It's a very interesting one. I don't have any that I'm aware of. I just sold my Tesla. If that's look, Bitcoin's a mysterious beast to me, and my instincts are it's real, and but it's not something that I've invested in. But that's probably because I don't understand it. But I wouldn't discount it in the future. I think it is real. I think it's here to stay.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, let's turn to the business of sport, because you have been involved in the Sydney Swans for almost 20 years. You've been chairman since 2013. What have you learned about the business of sport in this time?
Well, sport and business are completely different animals. And a lot of people I see when they get involved in professional sports, when they've had a business background, they'll suddenly become chairman or president of an AFL club, for example, and if they say, I can do this because it's just like business, you know that they don't know what they're talking about. And if you're a supporter of that club, be very worried, because it's completely different. There are clearly parallels between sport and business, and I love using sporting analogies for everyday life. I use it all the time, but they're completely different. I mean, sport is about, there's far more about passion. There's far more passion in it, and the analogy I'll often give is, if you're running a football club, your customers are fans. They're passionate. They might have had multiple generations. They bleed for your club. They love it. They know the players. They love the players. If you lose year in, year out, they'll keep coming back. Because it's in their blood. They love it. And for them, success is winning a game on a weekend and hopefully some finals and hopefully premierships. But that's what success is. Delivering a profit. 99.9% of fans wouldn't know whether you were profitable or not, and they wouldn't care less. What they want is for you to win. They want you to have great players, and they want to be inspired. And, that's what sport's about. It's about the passion. And business, shareholders, they don't really barrack for you, do they?
Bryce was barracking for Afterpay pretty hard.
Yeah. Bryce is one of the exceptions.
Yeah.
I find shareholders, they barrack for you as long as you're winning.
Yeah.
And if you start losing, they suddenly barrack for another team pretty quickly. So it's far more transactional, I guess, business, in the sense that and fair enough, it's money involved. Shareholders are in it for returns. They want dividends. They want share price appreciation. And it's very different in that sense. A lot of the business principles that you would use in business can be applied to the business of sport, but at the end of the day, what matters in sport is winning, and you can never lose sight of that. And I think football clubs and any sporting organisations at time, and you see it with cricket from in recent times, lose sight of what it's about. And what it's about is winning.
Mm.
That's as simple as that. And you can pretend it's about changing the world and everything else. That's all important, and that's part of the social contract of sport, that you actually do good things and help advocate for causes. But at the end of the day, it's about winning. And business is about profits.
Yeah. Well, the Swans have one of the best reputations in the league in terms of how well run the organisation is, and I think a lot of that credit lies with you. And I think a lot of the lessons in that are in the book, What Matters. But I guess can you unpack it a little bit? How did the Swans get that reputation? What have you taken from your business career and from your experience at the Swans to really get the Swans organisation running really well? And I guess most importantly, what can a team like Bryce's Essendon Bombers learn from your leadership?
We don't
at
need
the
to learn anything. Premiers 2024.
How long have we got?
Yeah.
The Bombers. Look, I think there are many parallels in sport. So firstly, where is the reputation and the success of the Sydney Swans come from? The Swans have been around for almost 150 years, and so it's the baton is passed year after year. And I think in its time in Sydney, had many opportunities to go broke. Had many opportunities to go broke before it came to Sydney, and it's really a succession of great people who have taken the club from where it was to where it is today, and people like Peter Wynett, Basil Sellers, and a guy who's actually chairman of our asset management business, Richard Collis, looms pretty large in that, and he was chairman for 20 years. I think it's about just building on success, and it's about great people and just getting better every year and making sure that you have the right culture, and cultures to me is everything. And the lessons I've learned in sport apply very much to business, where it's all about culture, it's about people, it's about playing people in the right position. I'm a big believer in that. Someone that's great, I use the analogy often I use it in the book, but I use it often just because someone's a great full forward, and they might be the greatest full forward of all times. Tony Lockett, for example. Try and play them in the back line, they'd be hopeless. Put them in the midfield, terrible. So you've got to play people in positions, and if that's how people reach their full potential. And I think the culture of the Swans, which is built up over a long period of time, is really about excellence and just having a good culture, good people, doing the right things, doing the basics, and not trying to overpromise. And I think that's something we've been pretty careful about. We don't make bold predictions. We just try and achieve gradually and get better. And
Well, you say bold predictions. Bryce and I make bold predictions on the show every year, and one for me is often that the Swans will win the premiership, and I'm yet to be right, but I think I will so.
I'm also just imagining Tony Lockett playing in the midfield. It's quite a funny sight.
Yeah.
Well, I've got many plugger stories, but playing in position is really important. It's something I've learnt in certainly have applied a lot in business. Is you can have somebody who isn't succeeding in a certain role, and if you can move them to another role which they might be more suited to, and they flourish, and that's the art of management. I think it's it is a great learning from sport, is if you can get people and allow them to play in their best position, then they can reach their full potential. You play them in the wrong position, they won't.
A key part of the book is around great leadership, and in preparing for this interview, we found an example that required leadership probably like none other, at least in the AFL's recent history, which was in the midst of COVID in 2020, the AFL assembled a war cabinet, of which you were a part of. Gillon McLachlan, Eddie Maguire from Collingwood, Peter Gordon from the Bulldogs, Gill, and then Richard Goyder.
Don't forget Jeff Kennett.
I won't. He would not forgive that. A pretty powerful war cabinet, but I imagine a time where you had to make some really difficult decisions, and a lot of the leadership lessons that you write about in the book were really required at that moment. Can you take us into the room at that time and talk about what was required then and what it's been like over the last 18 months?
Yeah, look, it was an extraordinary time, and it happened, as we all know, so quickly, and that was the amazing aspect of it, is just how quickly things unravelled in the whole business world, in society generally, and AFL was no different. We were in Melbourne, and it was the season launch. The presidents get together with the CEOs and the AFL Commission, and they have the season launch that evening, and the debate on that day was, I don't know what we were debating, something trivial in retrospect, and I was quite focused on this thing called coronavirus. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's quite bad. And I was focused on it because I actually do. I've got involvement with University of South Australia, and if you remember, the universities were the first real industry that seemed to be hit, and everyone was saying, "Oh, the universities, it's really hurting them because of foreign students."
Yeah.
And so I was quite aware of it, and I was sort of thinking at the time, talking to Richard Goyder, who's the chairman of the AFL, this coronavirus, this could be a problem. And that meeting ended. Everyone was shaking hands. There was. By the time the meeting ended, the season was in turmoil. The call had come through from the Victorian government. It was turmoil. So it unravelled extremely quickly. There was no rule book. No one knew what was going to happen, and the AFL, it was just unfathomable that we couldn't play games. There couldn't be crowds, and very, very quickly that led to a whole lot of issues which were extraordinarily serious. And I think that football being football, people probably didn't grab onto them as quickly as they could. And they were issues like, if you don't play games, what happens with membership revenue? What happens with television rights? How do we pay the bills? I mean, the majority of clubs are only a few bad months away from insolvency, really. So it was pretty chronic issue, and there was no rule book. So we had to, the War Cabinet met. We were meeting very early in the morning. I'd talk to Gillan McLaughlin, 5 in the morning sometimes, then again at 2 in the morning, midnight. It was extraordinary hours. It was very stressful, and there was a genuine prospect that clubs and even the AFL could fail, go into administration. So it wasn't a great experience, I can tell you. It was very difficult. And just extraordinary how the industry has come through it, and everyone pulled together. That didn't last for long, obviously, it never does in footy. But everyone pulled together, and there was I think a real collegiate approach to solving all of the issues, and that was from members sticking with their clubs, the media rights deals staying in place, governments facilitating travel bubbles and games without crowds, venues facilitating games without crowds. So there was everyone working together, government clearly assisting with financing, and because of that, I think the games, ironically, it's genuinely come through in a stronger way. In the clubs, I think, whilst there's a lot of more debt in the system, I think the clubs are in a really strong position now.
Well, as spectators and supporters, it was certainly good to see it get off the ground, and looking from the outside, it would have been incredibly challenging, but getting those bubbles in place and still giving the fans the opportunity to support their teams was great.
Well, it's nothing better than seeing Collingwood play Essendon with no crowd.
But let's get that grand final.
Supporters' dream.
Looking forward to the grand final being back at the G though at some point. That'll be a nice thing to
wouldn't
see.
that be great?
Yeah.
One day at the SCG maybe.
No, that'd be no. So, Andrew, you've just written What Matters, Secrets of Great Leaders, Business Builders and Professional Investors. So let's start at the top. Are you able to give us an overview of the book? What was the key message that you were really trying to get across?
Yeah, it didn't start out as a book. When I stepped down as CEO of MA Financial Group at our results in February 2020, just as COVID hit, so it looked like I was
Genius.
It wasn't that way at all. And we were in lockdown, and so I was sitting around and I didn't know what to do, and I was very involved, obviously, as we discussed earlier, with the AFL, and Chris and Julian were doing a great job running the business and going through all of the crisis management. And one of the things I'd undertaken to do when I stepped down as CEO, because I'm still very involved in the business, was to establish the MA Academy, which is unashamedly pinched from the Swans Academy. And the concept is that MA Financial Group is a talent. I look at it as a talent factory, and our greatest asset is our ability to hire great people, train them, and retain them. And so the whole idea of the MA Academy was to create a learning institute within the business that would actually teach and train our people from the most junior through to the most senior, and teach them not in an academic sense, but teach them very practically. This is how things happen. And anyone that's been to university knows that the first thing when you get into the real world, into business, you suddenly realise, wow, I learned all this stuff.
I know nothing, yeah.
And it's nothing like what we do. And that's right. So the Academy's about teaching people, okay, this is how you do things and this is why, and actually get some of the best professionals in their field to teach younger people, and in some instances have the younger people coming through teaching the older ones, and that can be it could be technology, AI, Bitcoin. There's a whole lot of stuff you can learn 360 because people have different perspectives. And so I thought, well, I've got to start this academy. I don't really know how to start an academy, and so I just started writing down these are the things I think would be worth teaching, and they became essentially the chapters in the book. And so I just wrote the book, and it's not an academic text. Because I wrote it, so you've got a fair idea it's not. There's a lot of footy in there, but it was really just going through various things that I thought were important lessons, ranging from how to present to people, whether it's in a written form or verbally. What are the important lessons that I've learned over time, and the most important lesson is when you present, to me, is simplicity. Don't overcomplicate it too many. Particularly younger people that come into the business world, they try and overcomplicate things. They use complicated words. They have too much information, too many pages, too many graphs, too many, and people just want to know the answer generally. Yeah. And so one of the lessons is just tell people what they want to know. Tell them the answer, and then if you want to then write 100 pages of background, do it. But put it in the background.
Yeah.
And so those sorts of lessons, and managing people. I love managing people. I think that's something that's critically important, and particularly in banking, not many bankers are very good at managing people. They tend to be focused on themselves, and I love managing people. And I think the lessons of how to do that, and the importance of actually getting the best out of people that work with you and for you, is fundamental. Because if you can get the best out of everybody when they work in a team environment, there's no stopping you. And that's the secret to any great, whether it's a football club or a business. If you've got great people, and they can all have the ability to reach their full potential and be inspired, encouraged, given the tools that they need, given guidance if they're doing things poorly, to tell them, if they're in the wrong position, to move them. Treat people fairly, all those sorts of things that are critically important. If you get that right, and then if through writing the book, people in our business can learn these lessons and get better quicker, I think it just has a knock-on effect. The compounding is really important.
So that people theme is clearly a key theme in the book, and it sounds like it's also been a key theme in your career, or your business plan was get capital, get good people, and look where it became, billions of dollars in market cap.
Do stuff.
Yeah.
Do stuff.
Do stuff. And these days, if you look at the market, it feels like there's plenty of capital around, but the finding great people and then developing great people is the real challenge for businesses big and small. Bryce and I are trying to build a business here. Bryce is trying to get on that Forbes 40 under 40 list. What advice would you have for us in terms of trying to find the best people and then trying to develop them?
Well, I think probably the core bit of advice I give to anybody is everybody in their career becomes, in my experience, they become a carbon copy for those that know what carbon copy is.
Yeah.
But they do become replicas of their mentors. And so I think if you guys are good guys, I can see you're high energy, you don't take yourselves too seriously. I can see that and that's a core theme that I always try and have. If you are great people and understand what you're doing, have a deep vision for what you want to do, you'll inspire people to join you, and they want to join you, and they won't leave. And I think the business plan you have to have has to be really simple. Don't try and do too much too quickly. And I write a lot about that. And I think it's a common mistake that I see. What are the common mistakes people make building a business? One of the simple ones is they try and do everything, and you see it all the time. Like, we're going to do this, 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 we're going to do this. Just do one thing really well.
Yeah.
Do it really well. Get really good at it, and then when you're really good at it, and get some people and teach them how to do it, you can then move on and do the next thing and do that really well, and just go step by step.
Yeah.
And it's not rocket science, because only rocket science is. But that's their core lesson. Make sure you've got enough capital.
Yeah.
To do what you want. Just get really good. Be passionate about it. Be really good at it, and don't go too fast.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that, most people will succeed. And where people don't succeed is when they either run out of capital or they go too quickly. And it's like doing a renovation, building a business. It always takes longer, and it costs more.
Yeah.
And if you remember that, you're on the path to mental breakdown.
Yeah.
To success.
That's good. That's good.
What are the characteristics other than sort of that ability to inspire and have a clear vision? What other characteristics have you seen across really good business leaders that, that they share?
Yeah, I think there's a whole lot. I've probably got lists of them. I can't remember what's in the list, but I think one of the core things is authenticity, and you'll hear people talk about it, and a lot of people talk about authenticity and they're not authentic, which is the irony of that's, I guess, it's life. But being true to yourself, and actually people can spot a phony, and if you're authentic and you walk the walk, you talk the talk, and you actually get in there and do stuff, that's what great leaders do. And what great leaders don't do, and I've seen this in banking, over and over, is people, they think they're a leader because their business card says that they're managing director or they've been around a long time. They think they're a leader, and they dress well. They've got a tie on like me. It's probably not as nice as mine, but they got a tie on. They got shiny shoes. They got a nice car. They got a good CV. They've done deals. And, they're pretty cool. But they're not authentic, and they're not real leaders because they don't do the hard work. They don't value their team. They just tell them go and do this, and they take all the glory. They don't. They're not in the trenches. And great leadership's, I think, largely just behaving in a way in which people want to follow, and that means you've got to be a good person. Be honest, be fair. Fairness is something I talk about in the book repeatedly. I think fairness is grossly underrated as a characteristic in success. If you're fair with people, whether it's staff, whether it's customers, whoever it is, then everything seems to work, and people get better. And the better you treat people, the better they'll treat people, and it's a virtuous circle. And if you treat people poorly, if you don't do the hard work as a leader, people aren't going to follow you. They're going to say, well, I don't really care. He doesn't really care. I don't.
Yeah.
So I think doing the hard work.
So you mentioned mentors there, and a big part of looking at leadership and I guess becoming a leader is looking at mentors and trying to emulate them. Is there anyone that comes to mind in your life, either, you know, coming up in business that you really tried to model yourself on or was a mentor, or these days looking at, you know, your career in footy, are there any sportsmen that you're like...
I don't know if I have a career in footy, by the way.
In involvement in footy, shall we say.
Tangential involvement.
That you look at and you're like, these guys are just excellent leaders. You know, they were who were front of mind when I was writing this book.
Yeah, look, I do, and I've had many clients who, you know, I've had I guess I've been fortunate to have some great clients over my career, people like Frank Lowy.
Yeah.
And to observe how they lead and how they bring the best out in people and how they make decisions, how they take risks. You know, because business is really about, it's a series of calculated risk, you know, risk assessment and making judgments of risk and then backing yourself and backing others to execute and don't take too big a risk that can kill you. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that, and I've seen people who've done it really well, and I've seen people who've done poorly, failed. So, you know, from my own perspective, I've learnt lots, and there's lots of examples in the book. What matters is things I've learnt from people in sport, in business, you know, dealing with politicians, dealing with all sorts of people. The good things I've seen and the bad things I've seen. Mm-hmm. And what I try and do is take the good things and don't do the bad things. I'm not perfect, so I get things wrong plenty of times. And obviously, but I've still got a number of people who, you know, throughout my career have been very important to me as mentors. And, you know, it's not bits of, you know, that's more a personal connection. I mean, someone like Richard Collis, you know, has been an important mentor to me, you know, in a football sense, but he was, you know, he started off as a client. The first time I ever met him, he threw me out of a meeting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's been trying to do it ever since. But he's been an important mentor to me. A guy by the name of Peter Crossing, who just retired a couple of years ago at UBS, you know, he was an important mentor to me. He taught me a lot about banking. Mm. So you take, you know, things from different people in different ways, and, you know, I think I'm a great observer of people, and, you know, that's why I love shows like Seinfeld, for example, because they're observation comedies, and I find that really interesting, and I enjoy it. And, you know, just observing what people do, the good things people do, and just how impactful it is if with these people, and how they impact other people's lives. And you know, it's as you get older and more experienced, you learn that people do watch you. If you're doing something at a high level or successfully, people watch you, and you are a mentor. You can't get away from that. And that's why you've always got to, you know, be game on and getting better. You know, one of my core, I don't sit around. I don't read business books. I'm not into all that sort of stuff. But one of the things I say to myself, it's coming that time of year, when I say it, is at the end of every year I do take stock of the prior year, and I'm an optimist, and I always look, you know, I'm always optimistic about what's going to happen, and I do say to myself, all right, we're going to a new year. I want to be better next year than I was this year. What can I do better? And, you know, I'll think about that. I'm thinking about it now, like, you know, and I actively do it, and I'll think, you know, last year I did all these good things. I'm happy with that. It's, you know, this wasn't so good, and these things I really think I can get better at. And nice. If you can do that every year, you will get better as a person.
Yeah. I think it's heartening that someone who's achieved the level of success that you have is still always looking, you know, how they can improve and what they can do better. Yeah.
We all can, because you're kidding yourself if you think that, you know, everything you do is right. I mean, it's not. I mean, you make lots of mistakes. You worry about things that you shouldn't worry about. We all do that. And you guys, if you're building your business, I'm sure you've got 1,000 things to worry about.
So much.
But if you're optimistic, it's amazing how great things can happen.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, the book is What Matters. Bryce, do you want to hold it up to the camera for people watching on YouTube? People can get it wherever good books are sold.
Wherever that is.
But look, we appreciate you taking the time, and we appreciate you putting a lot of your lessons into this book. We do like to finish with the final 3 questions, but before we do, as well as the book, if people want to follow, you know, your work on the MA Academy. I think you have a podcast these days.
The podcast
any
with Adam
writings.
Spencer, yes.
Where should they go to follow?
Go to the MA Financial, I think it's mafinancial.com, and you'll find all the podcasts and the book and whatever other stuff is on our internet of things.
Great. Nice one. Well, we'll get stuck into these final 3 questions. The first one is, do you have any books that you consider must-reads?
Well, that's an easy one, isn't it?
Yeah. We should say except for What Matters.
Oh, right. Okay. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. No. Look, I don't... What Great Brands Do is a book which I talk about, which is probably one of the more recent ones I've read. Great book about great brands and how your brand becomes the compass for decision making. And that's something whenever I do read anything, I bother everyone at MA Financial saying, I've just read this and it's really good and we should do this. And that's pretty cool, that book.
Nice one.
Nice.
The next one is, forget valuation or anything like that, just purely on the company itself. What's the best company you've ever come across?
Gosh, the best company.
It's a big question. We know.
Can I say equity, mate?
You can.
What a great. Look, I think it's an impossible question to answer, so I'm not going to answer it.
Fair enough. We'll take the answer as equity mates.
It's equity, mates.
And then finally, if you think back to your younger self, starting out in investment banking, starting out as an investor, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think in terms of a younger self starting out in a career would be optimistic and don't worry too much, because I think one thing I think we all do and I observe is people get really they worry. There's a lot to worry about in the world. Worry. Don't worry too much, because most things work out, and if you've got a positive outlook and you're enthusiastic and you've got energy and you do the right thing, things will work out.
Nice.
Well,
great way to end, Andrew. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your thoughts, and can't wait to hear the feedback from our community as they tuck into the book. So a reminder, it's called What Matters. So go and check it out. We'll have a link in our show notes, but absolutely appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
Pleasure. Go Swans.
Go the Swans.
Go the Bombers.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.